Her hands were shaking when she handed me the check. Not trembling, not fidgeting, shaking. The kind you can't hide, no matter how hard you press your palm flat against the table. Across from me, at a booth in the back corner of a place that charged $14 for a grilled cheese, Cecily Marsh set the bill down between us and kept her eyes on the menu she'd already closed. Then she said, quietly enough that the couple beside us couldn't hear, "I don't have enough to cover my half." The server was still hovering somewhere behind me. A table of 4 near the window was laughing about something. A toddler in a high chair 2 booths over was systematically destroying a stack of crackers with a joy that I genuinely respected, and I knew that whatever came out of my mouth in the next 5 seconds was going to define the entire evening. Either I'd make this worse or I wouldn't. My name is Joel Hartley. I'm 31 years old, and I teach 8th grade history at a public middle school in Columbus, Ohio, which means I spend a large portion of my professional life watching young people navigate humiliation in real time. Kids who give wrong answers and wait for the room to laugh. Kids who walk into class with the same shirt they wore 2 days ago and sit near the back hoping no one notices. Kids who are brilliant and terrified and pretending they're neither. I know what it looks like when someone is bracing for embarrassment. I've seen it 6 periods a day for 7 years. Cecily looked exactly like that. We'd met through her coworker, a guy named Paul who I played pickup basketball with on weekends, and who had spent the last 2 months telling me I needed to meet someone who read books that weren't assigned by a curriculum committee. "She's smart," Paul had said, shooting a free throw badly. "And she's funny in this specific way where you think she's being polite, and then you realize she's been quietly roasting you for 4 minutes." That description had done something to my attention that basketball usually couldn't. Cecily worked as a program coordinator for a nonprofit that did digital literacy outreach, helping adults in underserved neighborhoods learn to use computers, apply for jobs online, write emails, that kind of thing. Paul had met her at a community service event that he'd attended, if I knew Paul, mostly for the free lunch. "She gave a whole presentation," he said. I retained nothing because I was thinking about the presentation. She'd suggested the restaurant. I'd said yes without looking it up, which in retrospect was an error on my part. $14 for a grilled cheese. I was pretty sure my entire classroom supply budget for October was lower than our appetizer. When she walked in, I was already at the booth, half a glass of water in, mildly panicking about whether I'd chosen the right side of the table. She wore a blue cardigan, dark jeans, earrings shaped like tiny paper cranes, and an expression that said she was used to arriving somewhere and quietly assessing whether it was safe. "You must be Joel," she said. "I've been going by it for 31 years, I said. No major complaints. That got a real laugh. Small, surprised, and warm, in a way that made the booth feel less like a strange competitive interview. For the first 12 minutes, things were good. Better than good. She asked me what I taught, and then, unlike most people, asked a follow-up question instead of pivoting to herself. I found out she had a thing about old maps. I told her I kept a 1940s US map on the back wall of my classroom, just to watch the kids argue about what's missing. She said she once spent 45 minutes on a Wikipedia spiral that started with the Louisiana Purchase and ended with a court case involving a parrot. I told her that sounded like a legitimate academic journey. "8th graders must love you," she said. "8th graders would push me into traffic if they thought they could get away with it," I said, "which I respect." Her smile tilted. "You respect the instinct to commit crimes? I respect honesty about your feelings." Something in her expression shifted. Just slightly. Like that meant something she wasn't going to say yet. Then the check came. We hadn't ordered food yet, just drinks. But the table next to us had ordered something that smelled extravagant, and the server left a small card with the happy hour specials. And Cecily looked at it and went quiet. She opened the menu again. Her eyes moved down the prices. I watched her shoulders do this subtle thing where they pulled together just slightly, the way a person adjusts when they're trying to recalculate. I looked at my own menu. $16 for a chicken sandwich. The salads had started at $13. There was a pasta dish that was listed below a decorative line on the page like the restaurant was proud of it. It cost $22 and was described using the word artisanal twice. I had a sudden powerful empathy for my students. When she finally set the menu down and looked at me with that expression, the one that was trying very hard to seem normal while clearly not being normal, I thought of every kid I'd ever watched try to hold it together in public. The ones who were good at hiding it and the ones who weren't, and the specific particular courage it took to stop hiding. "I don't have enough to cover my half," she said. I didn't say anything right away. I looked at the menu, then at the table, then at her. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Yeah." I put the menu down. "Can I ask you something first, though?" She looked wary, which I understood. "Sure. Have you ever been to that food truck on 4th Street? The one with the Korean barbecue tacos?" She stared at me. "What?" "Because I drove past it on the way here, and I've been thinking about it for 3 blocks, and I don't think I can concentrate on artisanal pasta when that exists nearby." Cecily's mouth opened, then closed. Then she made a sound that was part exhale, part laugh, and quickly pressed her fingers to her lips. "Joel," she said. "The menu here is beautiful," I said. "Very elegant font. But I think we may have accidentally walked into a restaurant that charges rent." That's when she actually laughed. Fully and without warning, the kind that embarrassed her a little and that she immediately tried to contain. I pulled out my wallet and left a 5 on the table for the waters we'd had and the 6 minutes of the server's time, because that's what my mother would have done, and then I stood and offered her my hand across the table. Not a rescue, an invitation. She looked at my hand, then at me. There was this moment, brief, real, where her face did something careful, like she was deciding whether this was a trap dressed up as kindness. Then she took my hand. Her palm was warm. I felt that handshake all the way up to my shoulder in a way I did not intend to analyze out loud. We walked out of the restaurant and into a Tuesday night in Columbus that smelled like October and car exhaust, and someone nearby cooking something with garlic. Cecily walked beside me with her arms loosely folded, not quite closed off, just contained. Like she was waiting for the part where I made it complicated. "For the record," she said, "I actually looked up the prices before I suggested that place and panicked and then told myself it would be fine." "How long ago was that?" "This morning." The panic portion lasted until approximately 5 minutes ago. "Classic," I said. "Pre-panic, live panic, post-panic spiral. I was going to order just the soup and pretend I wasn't hungry." I shook my head. "The soup was $11, she groaned. "I know. Also, I'm pretty sure it came in a very small cup." "I know." She covered her face briefly with one hand. "I'm sorry. I picked that place because my coworker said it was good for first dates, and I didn't want to suggest somewhere cheap and then you thinking that you were cheap." She dropped her hand and looked at me sideways. "Yeah, I thought about that for a second. So you picked somewhere expensive you couldn't afford so I wouldn't think you were cheap." She winced. "When you say it like that, no, I get it. I meant that. It makes sense. It's just a trap." "It's a terrible trap," she agreed. "And you were in it alone for 8 hours, she exhaled. "Yes, that's exhausting." She looked at me, and something in her expression shifted from guarded to something else. Not open yet, but unlocking. The Korean barbecue taco truck was exactly where I'd seen it, parked under a dead streetlight that flickered in a way that was either romantic or ominous depending on your disposition. There was a short line. Cecily studied the menu board, actual prices, under $10 each, and her shoulders dropped about an inch. I noticed. I didn't say anything about it. She ordered a spicy pork taco and insisted on paying for her own. I didn't argue. She seemed to need that. "You didn't have to do that," she said while we waited. "Back there. The Korean barbecue thing? The whole thing. The graceful exit. You didn't have to make it easy." I thought about my mother, who worked 2 jobs when I was growing up, and who never once made me feel like the word budget was a synonym for failure. I thought about the summer I was 12 when we drove past a steakhouse and she said, "Maybe next year," and I understood. Even then, that next year probably meant never, and also that she would have starved before she let me feel ashamed. "Someone did it for me once," I said, "when it mattered." She was quiet for a second. "Who?" "My mom. Different situation. Same idea." Cecily looked at the truck menu like it was suddenly more interesting than it had been. "She sounds like a good person. She's the best person. Don't tell her I said that. She'll get smug." That earned a small laugh. The tension in her jaw eased a little. We got our tacos and found a spot at a long wooden counter. Under a string of orange lights someone had hung between 2 poles, the unofficial dining room of the taco truck operation. Cecily unwrapped hers carefully. I got salsa on my thumb immediately. So, she said, do you do this often, rescue women from expensive restaurants? This is my second time, I said. The first one involved a sushi place and a very confusing bill that turned out to have a 20% service charge built in that neither of us saw. What happened? We split it. Both pretended it was fine. Neither of us called the other one again. She tilted her head. Was it the bill or something else? Probably something else that the bill made easier to ignore. She chewed, thinking, honest. I try. She looked at me in a way that lasted a half-second longer than casual. Paul said you were straightforward. Paul also told me you were intimidatingly organized. She blinked. I'm not intimidatingly organized. He said you color-coded your Google Calendar. That's just normal. Cecily, I have one Google Calendar category and it's called Stuff. She laughed so fast she almost choked. Then she composed herself with a kind of dignity I respected. That's a category. It contains everything from dentist appointments to lesson plans. That's a cry for help. That's a minimalist lifestyle. Her eyes held mine a beat longer than usual. I also label my freezer containers, she said, with dates. See, that's functional. And I alphabetize my bookshelf by author or title, she paused, author last name. But within each author chronologically. I put my taco down. Okay, that's organized. I'm aware. Are you embarrassed by it? She considered. No. Are you judging it? I'm fascinated by it, I said, which was true. My bookshelf is sorted by whether I've read it or not. That's it? There's a third category. I think I own this, but maybe I left it at my parents' house. She pressed her lips together, fighting something. You teach children. Children are very forgiving. 8th graders are famously not. That's a fair point. We ate. The city moved around us. Headlights, someone on a bike, the distant sound of a sports bar reacting to something. Cecily finished her taco, and I was in the middle of finishing mine when her phone buzzed on the counter beside her hand. She glanced at it, and the ease went out of her face. Not slowly. All at once, like a light being switched off, she picked it up and turned it over screen down, which meant I'd already seen enough. A name. A message preview. You're really out here spending money you don't have to impress someone? I kept eating. I didn't say anything, but I felt something get very quiet inside me, the way it does when you've just understood something you weren't invited to understand. Cecily stared at the table. A strand of hair had slipped loose near her temple, and she tucked it back with one hand. Her jaw was tight. Sorry, she said, automatic and hollow. For what? She looked at me like the answer was obvious. For that. You didn't send it. She exhaled through her nose. No, but. She picked up the phone, then put it down again. It's my ex. He has a habit of timing things, showing up when he thinks he can make me doubt myself. I set my taco down. Is he okay? Like safe to ignore? She gave a short, joyless laugh. He's not dangerous. He's just, she searched for the word. Invested. In my awareness that from me. Or hard mind me, he likes reminding you of it? Yes. She said it simply, which told me she'd already processed this about him. It wasn't a revelation, just a fact she'd learned to carry. We were together for 2 years. He was never cruel exactly. He just kept score and made sure I knew where I stood in the numbers. I thought about the 8 words in that text. Money, you don't have to impress someone. 8 words that were specifically calibrated to land in the place she was most likely to feel them. Can I ask what happened tonight? With the restaurant? She wrapped her hands around her drink cup. He got into my head this morning, saw I was going on a date and made a comment about how I always tried too hard for men who weren't going to appreciate it, and She stopped. I let it steer me. I picked a restaurant I couldn't afford because he made me feel like the only way to be worth someone's time was to look like I had it together. The taco truck generator hummed behind us. A car alarm went off somewhere and then stopped. I looked at her. Can I say something that might sound strange? Probably. You looked like you had it together. Inside that restaurant, before you said anything, you looked calm and put together and like you belonged there. I let that settle for a second. The moment you told me the truth was the first moment all night I felt like I was talking to an actual person instead of a performance. Cecily stared at me. Not a criticism, I said, just. The truth-telling was my favorite part of the evening so far. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I started mentally reviewing whether I'd said that wrong. Then she said, he called me high maintenance once. For what? For asking him not to make jokes about how I bought generic cereal. I looked at the table. I thought about saying 7 different things and said none of them because none of them were mine to say. You know what's not high maintenance? I said finally. What? Wanting to eat cereal without the financial humiliation commentary. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. My bar is apparently very low. Maybe. Or maybe it's exactly where it should be and someone convinced you it was the ceiling. She looked at me. Really looked. The way people do when they're deciding whether to trust something. I didn't say anything else. I'd already used up my good lines. Your turn, she said. For what? Something embarrassing. You said the truth-telling was your favorite part, so. I thought about it. I have been mispronouncing quinoa in front of my coworker for 2 years. Saying it quinoa. She told me last week. I will never fully recover. Cecily's eyes widened. How have you been saying it? Quin-oa. That's not even. Where does the extra syllable come from? I genuinely don't know. I think I made up my own word. She was laughing now, real and unguarded, and it changed her whole face. Her eyes creased at the corners and she leaned forward a little like laughter was something that pulled her toward the world instead of pushing her away. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she picked it up, read it, and handed it to me. Not hiding it. Showing me. Paul's friend. Right. Classic. Let me know how that goes. Underneath, a second message that had arrived while I read the first. You know he only knows you through Paul. You think Paul didn't tell him everything? Cecily watched my face. I handed the phone back. Do you want to go? I asked. She looked surprised. What? We can go. End the night. It's okay. She shook her head. No, she said firmly. No, I'm done letting him decide when things end. She looked at me. Unless you want to go, I ordered a second taco in my head about 4 minutes ago, I said. I was just waiting for a natural moment to mention it. She laughed again. Shorter this time, but real. We got second tacos. She got the same thing again. I tried the short rib and reported back. We talked about Paul. I told her the full story of the basketball free throw. She told me he'd spent most of her organization's volunteer event asking logistical questions about the snack table. We agreed he was exactly the kind of person who should be in your life if you needed someone to accidentally introduce you to someone good without understanding. That's what he was doing. Did he tell you about me? She asked. He said you were smart and funny in a specific way. That's it? He also said you had good presentation skills, which was his way of saying he was distracted during your presentation. She covered her mouth. I know, I could tell. He kept nodding at wrong intervals. He does that in basketball too. Very supportive nodder. No idea what's happening. The night was cool now. The kind of October cool that isn't cold yet but reminds you that cold is coming. We stood up and drifted away from the truck without really deciding to. Just walking, because neither of us said stop. At a crosswalk, her hand brushed mine once. Then again. The third time, she hooked her fingers into mine and looked straight ahead. Don't make it weird, she said. I wasn't going to. You had the face of someone who was going to. I have a very expressive face. It doesn't mean anything. It meant something. It meant I was pleased, I said. That's all. Just pleased. Her fingers tightened around mine. We walked. We ended up at a park nearby. The kind of small city park that exists between an apartment complex and a parking garage, with a few benches and a row of trees that had already started dropping leaves. There was a light on a metal pole that flickered every 30 seconds like it was undecided about its purpose. We sat on a bench. Our knees touched. She didn't move away, and neither did I. I'm sorry about tonight, she said. The whole restaurant thing. I'm not. You're not? I'm sitting here. I have taco on my sleeve, which I think is character building, and I'm having the most interesting first date I've had in maybe 2 years. I looked at her. I'm not sorry about any of it. She was quiet. The flickering light above us made small shadows move across the ground. Can I tell you why I really picked that restaurant? She said. Only if you want to. She did. Her dad had gotten laid off 8 months ago. Logistics company, downsizing, severance that barely covered 2 months. She'd been helping cover some of his bills while he got back on his feet. Her own savings were thin. She'd been telling herself it was temporary and managing the anxiety of it, mostly by organizing things. Hence the calendar, the alphabetized shelves, the labeled freezer containers. Control what you can control. Her ex had known about her dad's situation and had, on more than one occasion, used it to make her feel like a charity case instead of a daughter doing what daughters do. He used to say things like, "It's okay, not everyone can afford experiences," she said. Like I was educationally impoverished. That's a despicable way to talk to someone. It was always framed as concern. She said the word carefully, like it was a word she'd turned over many times and found hollow. Which is harder to argue with. I knew what that looked like. I taught 12 and 13-year-olds who did it to each other. Wrapped the cruelty in a voice that sounded like care so the other person couldn't push back without looking oversensitive. "You're not a charity case," I said. She looked down. "You don't know me well enough to say that. You're helping your dad while he's struggling. I know enough." She was quiet. "My dad left when I was 9, I said. Not because I'd planned to. Because she'd handed me something real and I wanted to answer in kind. Not a dramatic leaving. Just one day less present, then absent, then gone. My mom worked at a hospital as a records coordinator and took shifts at a pharmacy on weekends for 3 years until she didn't have to anymore. She never complained. She also never let me feel like what we had was less than what we deserved. She just made it work, and made work feel like dignity instead of punishment." Cecily had gone very still beside me. "I don't talk about it a lot," I said. "Not because it's painful, just because it's mine, and most people don't know what to do with it. They either feel sorry, which I don't need, or they pivot to their own story, which I also don't need." "What do you need?" she asked softly. I thought about it. "Just to be believed. That it shaped me into something okay." She looked at me. Something moved across her face that wasn't pity. Recognition, maybe. "You alphabetize by author last name," I said, "and you label your freezer containers, and you helped your dad when he needed it." I looked at her. That's not a person who has it worse than she deserves. That's just a person in a hard chapter. Cecily blinked, looked away, her jaw moved. "Your turn," I said. I said something embarrassing already, something real, to balance mine. She thought for a second. Then, "I've been telling people I'm fine for so long that I can't tell anymore, whether I'm telling the truth or just really good at the performance." I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "That's real." She looked at me, surprised somehow by not being redirected. "I think," she said slowly, "that this is the most honest I've been with someone on a first date. I think it might be the most honest I've been on any date." Her mouth curved. The flickering light above us went still for a few seconds, like it had decided. Then she leaned slightly into me. Not dramatically, just a small, deliberate shift, shoulder to shoulder. I stayed where I was, solid, and let the contact be what it was. After a while she said, "I want to go get something warm to drink. Is that okay?" "There's a coffee place on Mound," I said. "They have this brown butter latte that I'm not proud of how much I think about." She stood and held out her hand. I took it. At the coffee place, she ordered a plain dark roast because she said anything fancier than drip coffee after 8 o'clock made her feel like she was borrowing against her future. I ordered the brown butter latte without shame. She looked at it when it came. "That looks ridiculous," she said. "It tastes like Autumn decided to try harder." She took a sip. Her expression went involuntarily soft for 1 second before she reassembled herself. "I retract nothing," she said. "You made a face. It was a neutral face. It was the face of someone whose opinion was being changed against her will." She handed it back. "It's fine. It's more than fine. Don't get smug. It's too late." We sat by the window. Rain had started outside, light and unhurried. She cupped both hands around her drip coffee. I watched her shoulders finally fully drop, the last of whatever she'd been carrying since before she walked into that restaurant. "Thank you," she said. "For tonight, for how you handled it." "I didn't handle anything. You told me the truth, and I just didn't mess it up." "That counts," she said. "It counts more than you know." I believed her. That was the part that stayed with me later, not the tacos or the flickering park light or the way she'd hooked her fingers into mine at the crosswalk. It was that. The specific weight of what it meant that someone had decided telling the truth was safe enough to try. She smiled at me over her coffee. "Is it too soon to say I'd like to do this again? The restaurant part or the taco part? The you part?" My chest did something I wasn't ready to name on a Tuesday. "Not too soon at all," I said. She reached across the table and straightened my coffee cup, which had been sitting at a slight angle. A small automatic gesture, half finished before she seemed to realize she'd done it. Then she looked up and caught my expression. I organize things when I'm happy, she said. I know, I said. I noticed. Her smile did something complicated. She looked back out at the rain. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, it was warm and slightly too loud, and we stayed longer than we needed to, which was exactly the right amount of time. When we left, I walked her to her car. She stopped at the driver's side and turned. You know what I kept thinking about in that restaurant? She said. What? Before I said anything, I was running through every version of how you might react. Like a worst-case simulation. She paused. And then you just didn't do any of them. What did worst case look like? Pity, she said immediately. Or that thing where someone says it's fine, but their face does something else. Or the bill becoming a whole conversation. Or you just getting quiet and distant and then texting me later that it was nice meeting me. I looked at her. Did any version involve Korean barbecue tacos? She laughed. No, rookie mistake in the simulation. She stepped forward and kissed me on the cheek. Her lips were warm and certain, and she smelled like coffee and cold air. Text me, she said, when you're home safe. She got in her car before I could overthink what that meant. I walked back to my own car with a particular feeling of a Tuesday that turned out to be more than a Tuesday. I texted her when I got home. Arrived. The brown butter lot has been thinking about you. 3 minutes later, tell it I said nothing. Then, 30 seconds after that, this was a good night. I set the phone down, looked at the ceiling. Yeah, it was. The second date happened on a Saturday. She suggested a food market downtown with 12 different vendors and price tags posted in large, clear numbers like someone had specifically designed it to be the opposite of bellwether. She wore the same paper crane earrings. I noticed before I decided to notice. We ate pierogies from a Polish stand, walked through a vendor selling hand-painted ceramic mugs, and ended up at a tiny table outside with cardboard containers of warm cider. She told me about the digital literacy program, specifically about a 63-year-old man named Harold, who had learned to use email 3 weeks ago and who now sent her a forwarded meme every morning at 7 a.m. without fail. She described it with the kind of warmth that lives in the specific details, not the summary. That's how you know someone loves their work. I told her about a student of mine who had submitted a history project about the Underground Railroad as a graphic novel in a format that shouldn't have worked and was brilliant. She asked questions, real ones, not polite ones. Between the cider and the ceramic mugs, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then put it face down. Same? I asked. He saw my Instagram story. She said it flatly, not distressed. Done. I posted the pierogies. The pierogies were threatening to him. I think I looked happy. I looked at her. Are you? She considered this seriously, like the question deserved honesty. Yeah, she said. I actually am. I didn't make a big thing out of that. But I picked up both our ciders and held one out to her, and she took it. And we sat there in the October Saturday light, like two people who'd found a thing and were carefully, cautiously deciding to keep it. A week later, she told me, over a phone call that ran 2 hours without us noticing, that she'd called her organization's HR department. Not about her ex specifically, he didn't work there, but because he'd been showing up to 2 community events her organization participated in, volunteering in ways that put him in her vicinity. She'd talked to her supervisor. She'd filed a report. She'd been afraid to do it for 4 months because he'd always framed it as coincidence, as community involvement, as her misreading things. What made you finally do it? I asked. She was quiet for a second. I was at the park with my friend last week, and I saw someone leave a restaurant with someone else, and I thought, she looked like she knew where she was going. And I realized I wanted to know where I was going. I didn't say anything for a moment. How do you feel? Scared, she said. But also like myself again. Does that make sense? Yeah, I said. It makes complete sense. 3 months later, the digital literacy program got a small grant for an upgraded lab space. The nonprofit threw a tiny celebration at their office. Sheet cake, sparkling cider, Harold emailing the invitation to 17 different people, including, apparently, his dentist. Cecily texted me a photo of the cake. It said, "We did it" in blue frosting, and there was a small fondant computer in the corner that she said one of the program participants had specifically requested. I stood in my classroom that evening, grading papers, and looked at that photo for longer than I needed to. I drove to the office. I knocked on the door. She opened it with cake frosting still on her thumb. You came, she said. Harold emailed me, I said. She stared. Harold has your email? He's been sending me memes for 6 weeks. I figured I owed him a response. She laughed, loud and unguarded, right there in the doorway. Then she grabbed my sleeve and pulled me inside. Harold shook my hand with the seriousness of a man conducting official business, and then forwarded me a meme from the party while we were standing next to each other. Cecily watched and said nothing, just pressed her lips together. Later, walking to our cars through the parking lot with the cold November air, turning our breath visible, she reached for my hand. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "Okay, the night at the restaurant. When I said I couldn't afford the date, I remember." She looked at the parking lot lights, then at me. I almost didn't say it. I almost just powered through. Ordered the cheapest thing and spent the whole night managing the math in my head. I know. I don't know why I said it. I think I was just, she paused, tired of performing fine. I thought about that. About all the ways people decide in small moments to either keep the distance or close it. "I'm glad you were tired," I said. She squeezed my hand. Then she stopped walking, turned to face me, and kissed me there in the parking lot of her nonprofit while someone's car alarm beeped once and went quiet. Her hands were warm on my face. Her breath smelled like sparkling cider and blue frosting. When she pulled back, she stayed close. "What would you have done?" she said. "If I hadn't said anything." I thought about it honestly. I'd have had a perfectly fine evening with someone I didn't quite get to know. She nodded slowly. "I would have driven home thinking something was missing," I said, "and not known what." Her eyes went soft. "The most expensive thing about that restaurant," I said, "wasn't on the menu." She looked at me. "What was it?" "The risk of being honest before you knew if it was safe." She was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped back, still holding my hand, and started walking toward the cars again. "Second question," she said. "Yeah? Was the brown butter latte actually that good? Or was not performing?" "It was objectively excellent." I thought about it for 3 days. "I know," I said. "Smug," she said. "Always." Her fingers stayed in mine the rest of the walk, and the November cold didn't feel cold in the particular way it doesn't when you're standing next to the right person, and you both know it, and neither of you needs to say it out loud.